What kind of mother sends her daughter a bill for being born? Not a joke, not sarcasm, an actual invoice. Line by line, diapers, school fees, food, rent, and at the bottom, total loss. She didn't send it privately. She sent it to the entire family. 43 relatives. Subject line, cost of raising a disappointment. She thought I would cry. She thought I would apologize. She thought I would shrink like I always did. But here's what she didn't know. For 3 years, I've worked in corporate compliance. I investigate financial misconduct for a living. I know how fraud hides. I know how paper trails work, and I know what happens when numbers don't match. So while she was calculating the cost of raising meh, I was quietly calculating something else. Withdrawals, tax filings, trust accounts, credit activity. She wanted to humiliate me in front of everyone. Instead, I pressed send, and by the time dessert was served, my mother wasn't hosting a Mother's Day dinner anymore. She was facing something far more expensive than a daughter. Because when you turn your child into a balance sheet, you better pray she doesn't know how to audit. The email arrived at 9:07 p.m. I remember the exact time because I was reviewing a compliance report when my phone vibrated across the glass surface of my desk. Subject line, cost of raising you. Final statement. For a second, I thought it was spam. Then I saw the sender. Dan Whitmore. My mother. My chest didn't tighten. It didn't drop. It just paused. Like my body knew something my brain hadn't processed yet. I stared at the screen for full 10 seconds before opening it. There was no greeting. No, hayava. No, happy early Mother's Day. Just an attachment. PDF, and beneath it, one sentence. Since you've decided to act like I owe you something, I thought it was time to settle accounts. Settle accounts, I clicked the attachment. The file opened slowly. It was formatted like a professional invoice. Header, line items, totals, even a payment due date at the top. Client Ava Whitmore. Description, 31 years of financial investment, total due 389, 4/20. My fingers went cold. I scrolled. Hospital delivery, 14,300. Private press school, 18,000. Braces, 6,200. Food, 9,000. Clothing, and 27,800. Car insurance, 11,500. College living expenses, 61,000. Line after line after line. And at the very bottom, bolded. Outstanding balance, 30 to 89, 4/20. Payment expected. Immediately. Below that. Perhaps now you'll understand the burden you've been. My lips parted slightly, but no sound came out. I read it twice. Then I looked at the CC list. 43 email addresses. Aunts, uncles, cousins, family, father. She hadn't just sent it to me. She had sent it to everyone. Public humiliation. Calculated. Strategic. I leaned back slowly in my chair. The office around me was quiet. Most people had already gone home. Through the windows, downtown Chicago glowed in soft orange streetlight. I should have cried. That's what old Ava would have done. But something inside me felt steady. Too steady. Because this wasn't impulsive. It was prepared. Which meant she'd been planning it. And if she'd been planning, that meant she felt safe. Safe enough to attack. Safe enough to assume I had nothing. I closed the PDF. Then I opened a folder on my desktop. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't labeled revenge. It was labeled archive. 3 years ago, I hadn't meant to start collecting anything. It had happened by accident. A tax discrepancy. A strange notice. A credit alert that didn't make sense. At first, I thought it was identity theft by a stranger. Then I followed the paper trail, and it led somewhere I didn't expect. Somewhere I didn't want it to lead. I hovered over the first subfolder. Trust transfers. My pulse slowed instead of quickened. You really shouldn't have done this. I murmured softly, not angrily, not emotionally, just factually. My mother has always loved control, not loud control, not violent control, polished control, image control, narrative control. Growing up, she introduced me as the sensitive one. My older brother, Grant, was the achiever. I was creative but difficult. Words matter, labels stick. By the time I was 16, I believed I was inherently disappointing. She never screamed, she never hit, she corrected. Adjusted, reframed. If I won something, she'd say, that's good. Your brother won something bigger last year. If I struggled, she'd say, I've always been dramatic. If I succeeded independently, she'd say, just remember who made that possible. Everything was a ledger with her, love included. So when the invoice came tonight, it wasn't shocking, it was consistent. What surprised me was how calm I felt. At 9:26 p.m., my phone buzzed again. Grant, did you see what she sent? I stared at the message for a moment before replying. Yes. 3 dots appeared immediately, stopped, appeared again. She's out of line. I almost smiled. Almost. Out of line. That's what he called it. Not cruel. Not abusive. Not humiliating. Out of line. Classic Grant, peacekeeper. Avoider, protector of the family structure at all costs. It's just emotional, he texted. She's stressed. Stressed. Of course she was. Because earlier this week, I'd refused to co-sign a business loan she wanted. A boutique expansion, risky numbers. Inflated projections, I told her no. Calmly, professionally. She'd gone quiet after that. Too quiet. Now I understood this wasn't about child, it was retaliation. I typed slowly. Did you read the entire email? A pause. Yeah, another pause. Longer this time. I don't think she meant it the way it sounds. There it was. Minimize. Translate. Soften. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes. This is why she felt safe. Because no one ever held her accountable. They reframed her. Framed her. My phone buzzed again. New message. Not from Grant, from my father. Call me? 2 words. No punctuation. My throat tightened slightly at that. Dad rarely texted. I grabbed my bag and left the office. The air outside was cool, heavy with approaching rain. I walked 3 blocks before calling him. He answered on the first ring. Ava. His voice sounded older tonight. Hi. A silence stretched between us. I didn't know she was going to send that, he said finally. I believed him. My father wasn't strategic, he was passive. There's a difference. She sent it to everyone, I said quietly. I know. Another pause. She's hurt. Of course she was. And this is how she handles hurt? I asked he'd answer. Because he didn't have one. She feels unappreciated. There it was again. Translation. Justification. I'm not sending her 389,000, I said calmly. I'm not asking you to, but you're not condemning her either. Silence. Rain began to fall lightly around me. Your mother has always been sensitive. I exhaled slowly, and I have another silence. Ava. I stopped walking under a street lamp. Dad, I said carefully, do you know where my college trust went? The question hung between us. What do you mean? He asked. I mean the account Grandma set up. I assume it paid for your expenses. It didn't. Silence. Longer this time. I'll talk her, he said eventually. I nodded even though he couldn't see me. I'm sure you will. We ended the call shortly after. I stood there in the rain for a full minute, not crying, just thinking. Because something had shifted tonight. The invoice wasn't just cruelty. It was permission. She had made it public. Which meant I no longer had to keep anything private. When I got home, I changed into sweatpants and sat at my kitchen table. I reopened the archive folder. Subfolder 1, Trust Transfer, PDF Statements, Withdrawal Date, Account Number, Transfer Destination, her personal checking account. Subfolder 2, Tax Filings, 6 consecutive years of claiming me as a dependent after I moved out. Refundament Mutters. Subfolder 3, Credit Activity, 3 credit cards opened in my name. Shipping address, her house. Subfolder 4, Boutique Loan Records, Inflated Inventory Values. Unreported cash sales, discrepancies. I didn't collect this for revenge. I collected it because something felt wrong. And when something feels wrong, you document. That's what compliance teaches you. Paper trails tell stories people can't rewrite. I closed the folder. Then I reopened my email. 43 recipients had already started replying. Shock? Confusion? Is this real? Diane, what is this? Ava, are you okay? She had wanted attention. She got it, but not the kind she expected. I drafted a reply. Not emotional. Not dramatic. Just controlled. Since this has been made public, I believe transparency should apply to all parties. I will respond Sunday at the family gathering. I didn't attach anything. Not yet. I hit send. My phone buzzed almost instantly. Grant, what are you doing? I stared at the screen. Then I typed EP. Balancing the books. I set my phone down. Outside, the rain had turned steady. Inside, my apartment felt still. For years, I'd absorbed the narrative. The difficult daughter. The financial burden. The emotional liability. Tonight, she'd put a number on me. But numbers cut both ways. And she had underestimated something critical. I don't lose when I'm prepared. I looked around my small, neat apartment. Everything. Mined. Paid for. Earned. Built. Not $1 from her. Not one favor owed. She wanted to reduce me to a debt. She forgot I understand assets. And on Sunday, in front of everyone, she copied. I was going to show her exactly what she owed. Mother's Day arrived bright and deceptively calm. Blue sky, mild breeze. The kind of afternoon that makes everything look harmless. I parked 2 houses down from my mother's place and sat in my car for a full minute, watching people arrive. White rental chairs lined the backyard. 3 long banquet tables stretched beneath a rented canopy. Catered trays were already being unloaded from a van, so this wasn't spontaneous. This was production. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. Neutral makeup. Navy dress. Composed. You're not here to fight, I told myself quietly. You're here to present. My phone buzzed. Please don't escalate this. I stared at the message. Escalate. Interesting word. As if I'd started something. I didn't respond. I stepped out of the car. Water floated over the fence. Glasses clinked. My mother's voice carried easily above the others. Bright, warm, charming. She was in performance mode. When I entered the yard, conversations dipped just slightly. Not silent, just thinner. People had read the email. My Aunt Marlene approached first. Ava, sweetheart, she squeezed my arm gently. I'm sure there's some misunderstanding. There always was. I'm good, I said calmly. Thank you. Her eyes searched my face for cracks. She didn't find any. My mother spotted me from across the yard. She paused mid-laugh. Then she smiled. Slow. Polished. Control, Eva, she called warmly. Made it. As if attendance wasn't mandatory. As if I hadn't been summoned. I walked toward her steadily. She kissed near my cheek again, like nothing unusual had happened. I'm glad you came, she murmured quietly enough that only I could hear. I wouldn't miss transparency, I replied. Her smile tightened almost imperceptibly. You've always been dramatic, she said softly. And you've always been strategic, I answered. Her eyes flickered. Just a fraction. There it is, I thought. Recognition. She hadn't expected resistance. She thought I would show up small, apologetic, embarrassed. Instead, I looked steady. That unsettled her. Good. Dad stood near the grill, flipping burgers with unnecessary focus. He avoided eye contact at first. When he finally looked up, his expression was complicated, not angry, not supportive. Just uncomfortable. You okay? He asked quietly. I will be. He nodded like that was enough. Grant joined us seconds later. Can we just keep this civil? He whispered urgently. I tilted my head slightly. Civil started when she hit send. He rubbed his forehead. She's humiliated. I almost laughed. Humiliated. Interesting how that word only applied one direction. Before I could respond, my mother clinked her glass with a fork. The sound cut cleanly through the yard. Everyone, she called sweetly, if we could gather for a moment. Chairs scraped softly against grass. 43 relatives formed a loose semicircle. Some sat, some stood. Everyone watched. She stepped forward, holding a printed copy of the invoice. Of course she had printed it. This wasn't about email. This was about spectacle. First, she began warmly. I want to thank everyone for coming. Polite nods, soft murmurs. Motherhood, she continued, is the most selfless role a woman can take on. I folded my hands in front of me. Calm breathing. She didn't look at me yet. She was building narrative. I've sacrificed a lot in my life, she said gently. Financially, emotionally, personally, here it comes. And sometimes, she added with a soft sigh, those sacrifices go unnoticed. She lifted the printed invoice slightly. I sent something earlier this week, she said lightly. Not to embarrass anyone, just to provide perspective. A few awkward glances passed between relatives. She finally turned toward me. I think accountability is healthy in families, she said, still smiling. Accountability. Interesting choice. She began reading line items aloud. Hospital costs, private schooling, dance lessons I quit at 12. The tone wasn't angry, it was clinical, measured. Each number a quiet accusation. I watched faces in the crowd, some uncomfortable, some curious, some sympathetic to her. That part didn't sting anymore. I'd outgrown the need to be understood instantly. She reached the final total, $389,420, she said clearly. And not once have I received gratitude. Silence. Soft wind rustled the canopy overhead. My name hung in the air like a verdict. She expected tears now, or defense, or apology. Instead, I waited, because silence is powerful when you don't rush to fill it. She shifted slightly. Not used to that. I just want acknowledgement, she said, voice softening. That raising a child isn't free. A few nods from older relatives. There it was. Moral framing. Parent as martyr. Child as debtor. I stepped forward calmly. Thank you for sharing, I said evenly. The politeness caught her off guard. A few relatives looked relieved. Oh good, they thought. It won't explode. Not yet. I agree. I continued gently. That accountability is important. My mother's smile returned. She thought I was conceding. That's why. I added calmly. I think full transparency matters. Her fingers tightened slightly around the paper. Transparency? She repeated. Yes. I reached into my purse, not dramatically, slowly. I pulled out nothing more than my phone. Gran inhaled sharply beside me. Ava, he whispered. But I didn't look at him. I looked at her. You calculated what I cost you? I said softly. Which is fair. Parents spend money. A few nods. Reasonable. But since we're discussing financial contributions publicly, I continued, it seems incomplete to ignore missing funds. The air shifted, subtle. But, real. What funds? My mother asked lightly. Too lightly. I opened my email app. 43 addresses were already drafted, she noticed. Her eyes narrowed just slightly. Ava, she said, voice still sweet but firmer now. This isn't necessary. You made it necessary? I replied calmly. My thumb hovered over sent. I didn't press it. Not yet. I wanted the psychological shift first. I'm not here to argue, I said. I'm here to clarify. Murmurs began around us. Dad stepped forward slightly. Maybe we should take this inside? He suggested weakly. No one moved. Because no one actually wanted privacy anymore. They wanted resolution. My mother laughed lightly. This is ridiculous, she said. You're overreacting. I tilted my head slightly. Am I? I looked around the yard. At what age? I asked gently, does a parent stop claiming their adult child as a dependent? A few brows furrowed, confusion spreading. My mother's jaw tightened. Ava, she warned quietly. I ignored it. And if a college trust was established by grandparents, I continued evenly, should it disappear before tuition is due? Now the murmurs were louder. Grant looked at me like he was seeing something new. Not emotional, strategic. My mother stepped closer, close enough that only I could hear her. You will regret this, she whispered. I met her gaze. I already did, I replied softly. Then I pressed send. 43 phones buzzed one after another. Heads dropped in unison. The shift was immediate. Confusion first, then concentration, then silence. Not polite silence, processing silence. My mother didn't move. Her confidence didn't collapse. It thinned. What did you send? She asked. Bank records, I answered calmly. Wind moved through the yard again. Chairs creaked softly. From somewhere in the semicircle, my uncle's voice broke the quiet. Deanne, not angry, not loud, just heavy. This transfer, he continued slowly. Why did Ava's trust move into your personal account? There was a first crack. My mother inhaled sharply. That was temporary, she said quickly. Family expenses. Another relative spoke. Another, why was it used for a down payment on the boutique renovation? Silence. Pure. Dense. Grant looked between us. Dad stared at the ground. I didn't smile, I didn't gloat. I simply stood still. Because this wasn't explosion. This was exposure. My mother straightened her shoulders. You're twisting context? She said sharply now. I managed that money responsibly. For yourself? I replied evenly. She stepped toward me again. You ungrateful. Careful. I said softly. Just one word. But controlled. The yard felt smaller now. the canopy heavier. People weren't looking at me anymore. They were looking at her, and that terrified her more than any accusation. She glanced around, searching for an ally, for someone to reframe it, to defend her. Grant opened his mouth, closed it. Dad finally looked up. "Dane," he said quietly, "did you move the trust?" That question hit harder than anything I'd said, because it came from him. Her eyes flicked toward him, then back to me, and for the first time since this began, she looked uncertain. Just a flicker. But enough, I exhaled slowly. This wasn't about screaming. It wasn't about humiliation. It was about narrative control shifting. She wanted a public stage. Now she had one, and she no longer held the script. The yard remained silent, waiting, and she had to decide, double down, or admit something. No one moved. The air felt thick, like a storm had rolled in without clouds. My mother stood in the center of her own backyard, holding a printed invoice that suddenly looked small in her hand. Dad's question lingered. "Deane, did you move the trust?" He didn't shout, he didn't accuse, he just asked. And somehow, that was worse. My mother's jaw tightened. Her fingers pressed so hard into the paper that it bent slightly at the corners. "Managed it," she said carefully. "That's what parents do." "That wasn't the question," I replied calmly. My voice didn't shake. I was proud of that. Around us, relatives stared down at their phones, scrolling through the email I had sent. Attached were clean bank statements, dates highlighted, transfer records circled, a simple timeline, no emotional language, just facts. The trust account, opened by my grandmother when I was born, had been closed 6 weeks before my freshman year of college. The full balance had been transferred to my mother's personal account. 3 days later, a payment had been made toward renovating her boutique storefront. The numbers didn't need commentary. They spoke. My Aunt Marlene looked up first. "Deanne," she said slowly, "why would Ava's education trust pay for tile flooring?" My mother laughed lightly, but the sound was thinner now. "You don't understand how family finances work," she said dismissively. "Money moves around. It's called management." "Then why?" My uncle pressed. "Did Ava take out student loans?" The question landed heavier than the others, because that one didn't just imply mismanagement. It implied choice. Dad looked at me. "You had loans?" he asked quietly. "Yes," I said evenly. $68,000. The silence that followed felt different. Not curious, not confused, disappointed, and not in me. My mother stepped forward, her composure slipping just slightly. "I did what I had to do at the time," she said sharply. "The business was struggling. If the boutique failed, we all suffered?" I asked softly. Her eyes flashed. "You benefited from that business your entire life." "I benefited from Grandma's trust," I corrected gently. "The one intended for tuition." Grant shifted beside me, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. He looked like someone watching a bridge collapse in slow motion. "This is getting out of hand," he muttered. "No," I said quietly. "It's getting accurate." The difference mattered. My mother turned toward the semicircle of relatives. "Are we really doing this?" she demanded. "On Mother's Day." "You chose the date?" I replied. She flinched. That one hit, because it was undeniable. She had planned this stage. She had chosen the audience. She had expected control. What she hadn't expected was resistance. My cousin Leela spoke next. "If it was temporary," she said cautiously, "why wasn't the money returned before tuition was due?" No one was yelling. No one was attacking. They were just asking. And questions are far more dangerous than accusations. My mother inhaled sharply. "You're all acting like I stole something," she snapped. I met her gaze calmly. "You did," I said. Gas rippled softly through the yard. Not dramatic. Just startled. Dad's shoulders sagged. "Dying," he said quietly. She turned on him. "Don't," she warned. "Don't you dare turn this into something it's not." "What is it then?" I asked. She looked at me like she used to when I was 14 and had questioned her about something small. Like I was insolent, like I was ungrateful. "You were never easy," she said suddenly. There it was. The pivot. Character attack. "You always needed more. More reassurance. More attention. More everything." I didn't respond, because this wasn't about personality. It was about money. And she knew it. "You think I didn't sacrifice," she continued, voice rising. "I built that boutique from nothing. I worked 16-hour days. I put food on this table. No one's denying that," I said evenly. "We're asking why my education fund disappeared." The directness cornered her. She glanced around again, searching for support. Grant finally stepped forward. He said carefully, "Why didn't you tell Dad about the transfer?" The yard went still, because that question shifted the target. Not just me, not just the trust, but secrecy. Dad looked at her sharply now. "You didn't tell me?" he asked. Her silence was answer enough. I watched something change in his face. Not rage, not yet, just realization. "You handled most of the finances," he said slowly. "I assumed." "Yes," she snapped. "You assumed, like you always do." The deflection was almost impressive. Almost. "You're trying to make me the villain," she continued, her voice trembling now, not with sadness, but with pressure. "After everything I've done." "No," I said quietly. "I'm making you accountable." The word hung there, accountable. It was the same word she'd used earlier. Now it belonged to me. My aunt crossed her arms. "Deane," she said firmly, "did you intend to repay the trust?" Another pause. Longer this time. My mother's composure cracked just a fraction. "What was family money?" she insisted. "What's the difference whose name it was under?" "The legal difference?" I replied softly. significant? Her eyes snapped to mine. You're threatening me. I'm clarifying reality. The wind picked up, rustling the canopy above us. It felt like the entire afternoon had shifted temperature. Dad finally stepped forward fully, no longer half hidden behind the grill. You should have told me, said quietly. She stared at him, stunned. I did this for us, she said, voice breaking now. For stability? At her expense? He asked. That question didn't come from anger. It came from something worse. Disappointment. And I saw it hit her. Not my words, not the relatives. His. She looked smaller suddenly, not physically, but structurally, like something foundational had shifted beneath her. You're all overreacting, she said weakly. It was years ago. Yes, I agreed. And I've been paying interest on it ever since. The sentence settled over the yard. Because it wasn't dramatic, it was true. Grant looked at me differently now, not like I was escalating, like I was revealing. Why didn't you say something before? He asked quietly. I met his gaze. Because I kept hoping she would. That one landed softly, but deeply. My mother closed her eyes briefly. For a moment, I almost saw the version of her that might have apologized. Almost. Instead, she straightened again. You think you're better than me now? She asked coldly. No, I said calmly. I think I'm done being beneath you. The honesty in that statement silenced everything. No one moved. No one filled the space. The stage she had built for humiliation had turned into something else entirely. A mirror. And she didn't like what it showed. Dad finally spoke again. We need to talk privately, he said. But it didn't feel private anymore. Nothing did. My mother looked at the semicircle of faces, no longer admiring, no longer supportive. Just watchful, careful. And that frightened her more than anger would have. You planned this? She whispered to me. Yes, I replied, because the truth was, I had, not to destroy her, but to protect myself. She had weaponized shame, I had weaponized documentation, and documentation doesn't blink. The first crack had formed, not loud, not explosive, but visible. And once a crack exists, pressure does the rest. The wind lifted the corner of the printed invoice still clutched in her hand. For the first time all afternoon, she lowered it, and that was the real beginning. No one clapped, no one gasped dramatically, they just read. 43 people standing in a quiet suburban backyard, staring down at glowing screens while the wind tugged lightly at the rented canopy overhead. My mother stood at the center of it all, still holding the printed invoice like it might protect her. Dad's question lingered in the air. Deanne, did you move the trust? He didn't raise his voice. He didn't accuse her. He just asked. And somehow that made it heavier. My mother blinked slowly, recalculating. It was managed, she said carefully. That account was under my oversight. That's not what he asked. I replied, calm and steady. The steadiness mattered. If I sounded emotional, if I sounded angry, she'd redirect. But facts are hard to redirect. My Uncle Victor cleared his throat. This transfer, he said, lifting his phone slightly, shows $84,000 withdrawn in one lump sum. My aunt added quietly, 6 weeks before Ava started college. My mother inhaled sharply. It was temporary, she said. The boutique needed liquidity. You all know how seasonal business works. I tilted my head slightly. And the plan to return it? I asked. She looked at me like I had insulted her. You're implying I stole from my own daughter? I'm implying the money never came back, I answered. The difference was precise. Behind me, Grant shifted his weight uneasily. Mom, he said quietly, do you tell Dad about the transfer? Dad looked at her fully now. That was new. For years he'd looked around conflict. Now he looked at it. She hesitated. Just half a second. But half a second is enough when 43 people are watching. I handled finances, she said defensively. That was our arrangement. That's not what I asked. Dad repeated softly. The air thinned. I watched her realize something important. This wasn't going to dissolve with charm. She had built her life on presentation. But presentation doesn't survive documentation. You all think you understand numbers, she said sharply, looking around the group. But you don't understand pressure, responsibility, carrying a family. K1 is attacking you, Aunt Marlene said gently. We're asking why Ava took loans if the trust existed. That question hung like a weight. Dad turned toward me. You had loans, he asked again as if hoping he'd misheard. Yes, I said evenly. Federal and private. 68,000 total. He looked genuinely shaken. You never told me it was that high. I assumed you knew the trust was gone. The silence changed shape. Before, it was curiosity. Now it was discomfort. Because if he didn't know, then what else didn't he know? My mother saw the shift too. You're turning him against me, she snapped. I'm answering questions, I replied. She stepped closer, lowering her voice so only I could hear. You could have handled this privately? You didn't, I said. That hit. Because it was undeniable. She had chosen public humiliation. She just hadn't planned for shared visibility. Grant ran a hand through his hair. This is spiraling, he muttered. No, I said calmly. It's clarifying. That word again? Clarifying. My cousin Lai looked up from her phone. There's also a tax issue, she said slowly. My mother stiffened. What tax issue? Dad asked. Leela swallowed. For 6 years after Ava moved out, she was claimed as a dependent. The wind stopped completely. The yard went very still. Dad looked confused. You can't claim someone who doesn't live with you, he said. You can, I replied evenly, if you're willing to risk an audit. My mother's composure flickered. That was a filing mistake, she said quickly. A clerical error. For 6 consecutive years. My uncle asked. She didn't answer immediately. That silence felt louder than anything spoken. I didn't interrupt. I didn't need to. The documents I'd sent were clean, simple, undeniable refund amounts highlighted, IRS notices attached, corrections filed by me. You told me. Dad said slowly that she agreed to that. My heart didn't race. It didn't need to. I never agreed, I said calmly. Dad turned back to her. You said she wanted you to handle it. She didn't meet his eyes. I assumed. No, he cut in softly, said she asked. That word landed like a crack in glass. My mother looked around again, searching for someone to defend her, but no one spoke, because this wasn't personality conflict, it was paperwork, and paperwork doesn't lie convincingly. You're all acting like criminals, she said suddenly, her voice sharp and brittle. Families help each other. Money flows where it's needed. Then why? I asked gently. Was my credit score 517 at 22? Several heads snapped toward me. She froze. The boutique renovation hadn't been the only movement. 3 credit cards opened in my name. Used, maxed, statements mailed to her address. You're exaggerating, she said quickly. I opened another attachment on my phone. Would you like me to forward the card agreements too? I asked. Her face drained. Dad stepped back slightly, like he needed physical space to process. Deanne, he said. But there was no anger in it, just exhaustion. The narrative she'd controlled for decades was slipping. Not in one dramatic collapse, but in fractures, small, sharp fractures. She shifted tactics. I did what I had to do, she said, her voice trembling now, not with guilt, but pressure. You were never grateful. You were difficult, always questioning, always pushing back. There it was, character assassination. When facts corner her, attack identity. You've told that story for years, I said softly, but it doesn't match the numbers. She looked at me like she didn't recognize me. Because this wasn't the daughter who swallowed criticism. This was someone else. Someone who had grown. Grant stepped forward finally. Mom, he said carefully, did you plan to tell us? Her eyes filled suddenly. Tears, weaponized vulnerability. I was protecting the family, she whispered. From what? I asked gently. She didn't answer, because the truth was simple. She was protecting herself. The invoice in her hand trembled slightly. The paper that had once felt like power now looked like evidence. You embarrassed me, she said to me suddenly. The projection was almost impressive. You tried to bill me for being born, I replied evenly. Another silence. This one different, this one heavy with recognition. Because no one in that yard could defend that choice. Even Grant looked unsettled now. Dad rubbed his face slowly. I trusted you, he said to her, not angry, not loud, just honest. That sentence seemed to hit her harder than anything else. For a split second, she looked smaller, not physically, but structurally, like the foundation beneath her had cracked. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing came out, because the performance required control, and control was gone. The backyard felt different now, not hostile, not chaotic, just aware. The audience she'd assembled witnessed my humiliation had become something else entirely. Witnesses, to her. I stepped back slightly. I wasn't triumphant. I wasn't smiling. I was steady, because this wasn't revenge. Not yet. This was exposure, and exposure is quiet. The wind lifted the corner of the invoice again. This time, she let it fall from her hand. It drifted lightly onto the grass between us. No one picked it up. Dad looked at it. Then at her. Then at me. And in that moment, something irreversible shifted. The first fracture had formed. And fractures don't seal cleanly. They spread. The invoice lay on the grass between us. Face down. Bent slightly at one corner. No one picked it up. For the first time in my life, my mother wasn't speaking. That was new. The backyard didn't erupt into shouting. There were no dramatic exits, no screaming matches, just quiet recalculation. My father was the first to move. He stepped away from the semicircle and walked toward the patio doors. Not in anger, not dramatically. He just needed distance. That frightened her more than yelling would have. Because anger can be manipulated. Silence cannot. Richard? She called after him. He didn't stop. The sliding door shut behind him. The sound was soft, but final. Grant looked between us, caught in the middle like he always had been. This is going too far, he said under his breath. I looked at him calmly. It already went too far. He didn't argue. Because he knew. Everyone did. My aunt cleared her throat. So what happens now? She asked carefully. It wasn't directed at me. It wasn't directed at her. It was directed at reality, and reality had shifted. My mother straightened slowly, regaining fragments of composure. You've made your point, she said to me, voice low and tight. Are you satisfied? Satisfied. Interesting word. No, I replied evenly. I'm protected. That distinction mattered. She folded her arms. You're threatening me. I'm documenting. Again, precise language, her eyes narrowed. You wouldn't. There it was. The assumption that I wouldn't take it further. That blood meant immunity. I held her gaze. You already know I would. The breeze picked up again, rustling the canopy above us. Several relatives began murmuring quietly among themselves. Funds still in hand. Screens still glowing. They weren't looking at me anymore. They were looking at her. And she felt it. For years, she had controlled the family narrative. The strong one, the selfless one. The provider now, the narrative had receipts. And receipts don't negotiate. Grant stepped closer to me. What exactly are you planning? He asked quietly. Nothing emotional? I said. Nothing dramatic. Then what? I met his eyes. Liquidation. He frowned. What does that mean? It means I'm done carrying liability. An hour later, most of the relatives had left. Not in anger, not loudly, just early. The celebration never resumed. The catered trays sat half-eaten. The white chairs stood mostly empty. My mother remained near the patio, arms wrapped around herself like she was cold. Dad hadn't returned outside. Grant stood with his hands in his pockets, staring at the grass where the invoice had fallen. I approached the patio door calmly. My mother followed. Ava, she said sharply, we are not involving lawyers. It wasn't a request, it was fear. I paused. I already did. The words landed clean, controlled, not theatrical. Her face drained of color. You what? I consulted an attorney 3 months ago, I said evenly. When the tax discrepancies didn't resolve. She blinked. Processing. 3 months ago. Yes. Because this wasn't reactionary. This was measured. You wouldn't file against your own mother, she whispered. I wouldn't steal from my own daughter. I replied. The symmetry was quiet, but devastating. Dad stepped into the kitchen doorway then. His face looked older than it had that morning. Is this true? He asked her. She didn't answer him. She was staring at me. You reported me, she demanded. I corrected fraudulent filings, I said calmly. There's a difference. She swayed slightly, steadying herself against the doorframe. You're destroying this family? No, I said softly. You destabilized it. Grant exhaled sharply. Can someone just explain what's happening? He asked, frustration rising, so I did. Clear, concise, clinical. The trust transfer was unauthorized under the original terms, I said. That's civil liability. I looked at my mother. The tax filings constitute federal fraud. Her breathing quickened. The credit accounts in my name are identity theft. Dad's hand gripped the back of a kitchen chair. Grant stared at me like he was seeing someone he didn't recognize. And you filed all of this? He asked quietly. I initiated corrections. The rest follows process. My mother's composure cracked. You're sending me to prison? She demanded. No, I said evenly. Your choices determine consequences. That was the part she couldn't tolerate, lack of control. For decades, she had shaped outcomes through emotion, guilt, narrative. But legal systems don't respond to narrative. They respond to evidence. You think you're so smart? She said bitterly. So righteous. No, I said again. Just finished. Finished absorbing blame. Finished carrying debt that wasn't mine. Finished protecting her from herself. Dad sank slowly into a chair. I need to see everything, he said quietly. You will? I answered. He nodded. Not at her, at me. And that was the moment she understood something irreversible. Her leverage was gone that night. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clear. There's a difference? Liquidation isn't revenge. It's removal of risk, removal of exposure, removal of ongoing damage. When an asset becomes a liability, you divest even if it hurts. Especially if it hurts. My phone buzzed just after 9 p.m. An email notification from my attorney. Subject line filed. I stared at it for a long moment before opening. The language was dry, precise. Civil claim initiated for trust misappropriation. Tax amendment documentation forwarded. Identity theft affidavit submitted. There was no anger in it, no emotion, just procedure. My mother called 3 times in a row. I didn't answer. She left one voicemail. Her voice sounded smaller than I'd ever heard it. Ava, we can fix this. We don't need outsiders involved. Call me. Outsiders, as if legality was intrusional. I deleted the voicemail, not out of cruelty, out of necessity. The next morning, my father called instead. His voice was steady. I reviewed the statements, he said quietly, and a long pause. I didn't know. He admitted that sentence carried more weight than any apology she could have given. I believe you, I said. He exhaled slowly. She put the house up as collateral for the boutique expansion? He added. I closed my eyes briefly. Of course she had. Leverage stacked on leverage. When? I asked. 2 years ago. The pattern deepened. This isn't just about your trust, he said quietly. I know. There it was. The full picture. Mismanagement layered over concealment, layered over pride. Liquidation wasn't optional anymore. It was inevitable. She's scared, he said. I know. She never thought you'd take it this far. I looked out the window at the city skyline. She shouldn't have taken it that far first. He didn't argue. By afternoon, relatives began texting. Not drama. Not gossip. Questions. Support. Silence from some. Distance from others. But the shift was undeniable. Narrative had changed. The woman who had tried to publicly bill her daughter for existence was now facing something she couldn't invoice away. My mother sent one final message that evening. You've chosen strangers over blood. I read it twice. Then replied once. I chose accountability, no anger, no lecture, just truth. Liquidation is rarely loud. It's paperwork, signatures, filing dates, shifts in ownership, and in that quiet administrative unraveling, her control dissolved. Not because I screamed, not because I shamed her, but because I stopped protecting her from consequence. That was the checkmate, not humiliation. Not revenge, removal, and once removed, there is no resetting the board. The letter arrived on a Wednesday. Certified mail, thick envelope, county seal stamped in the upper left corner. I wasn't at my mother's house when she signed for it, but I knew the moment it happened, because my father called me 27 minutes later. His voice sounded hollow. It's worse than I thought, he said quietly. I didn't ask what he meant. I already knew. When she put the house up as collateral, He continued, she refinanced at a variable rate. I closed my eyes briefly. Of course she had. Of course she believed the boutique would always recover. Of course she believed she could outpace the numbers. And I asked evenly. She missed 3 payments. The words landed without drama. Just consequence. Silence stretched between us. Then he said it. There's a notice of foreclosure. Eviction is an ugly word. Foreclosure sounds more technical, more polite, but they mean the same thing. Loss, forced removal, liquidation made visible. My mother had built her identity around that house, the granite countertops, the staged entryway, the carefully curated dinner parties. Presentation mattered to her. Optics mattered. The house was proof of success, proof of control. Now it was paper, deadlines, 30 days. She called me that night. I answered. Not out of obligation, out of clarity. You did this, she said immediately. No greeting, no softness. You defaulted? I replied calmly. You filed against me and froze the accounts. I filed for restitution. The bank acted independently. She laughed bitterly. You're hiding behind language. No, I said evenly. I'm separating cause from effect. Her breathing was uneven. They're going to take the house. They're going to take collateral tied to unpaid debt. I corrected. You're enjoying this? That one hurt a little, because she needed to believe that. She needed me to be cruel. It justified her. I'm not enjoying it, I said softly. I'm not preventing it either. Silence. Heavy. You could withdraw the claim, she said, and assume the liability. I asked gently. She didn't answer. Because she knew I wouldn't. 3 days later, I went to the house. Not to comfort her, not to argue, to observe. The front lawn looked the same. The hydrangeas she loved were in bloom. But there was a paper taped discreetly to the inside of the front window. Legal notice. Deadlines typed in impersonal font. She opened the door before I knocked. Her makeup was perfect, her posture straight, performance mode. Even now. You look composed, she said sharply. I am. She stepped aside. The house felt different, less like a home, more like a stage memory. Boxes sat stacked near the hallway, carefully labeled. Kitchen, office, seasonal. You're packing already, I observed. I'm not stupid, she snapped. No, she wasn't. She just believed she was untouchable. I can negotiate, she said. If you retract your filing. I won't. Her jaw tightened. You'd rather see your mother homeless. I'd rather see accountability than repetition. She turned away, pacing slightly. This is temporary, she insisted. I'll refinance again. With what income? I asked quietly. That hit. The boutique had been hemorrhaging cash for years. The audit had accelerated the scrutiny. Suppliers had tightened terms. Credit lines reduced. The illusion was cracking everywhere. You think you're superior, she said suddenly. No, I replied. I think I'm separate. That distinction landed harder than anger. Separate meant independent, not controlled, not obligated. She stopped pacing. Your father is leaving, she said flatly. I absorbed that without visible reaction. I know. He's choosing you. He's choosing truth. I corrected. Her composure fractured for a moment. You've taken everything, she whispered. No, I said gently. I stopped covering. The difference mattered. For years, I had absorbed blame to preserve image. Now I wasn't. And without someone cushioning the impact, consequences hit harder. 2 weeks later, the official foreclosure posting appeared on the county website. Public record, accessible to anyone who searched. Relatives noticed. Calls spread quietly. No dramatic family intervention. Just distance. Distance is colder than anger. Grant called me that evening. She's telling everyone you forced this. I expected that. She says you froze the accounts knowing the mortgage was tied to them. I filed for restitution. The court placed a temporary hold. He exhaled sharply. Did you know the mortgage was leveraged? Yes. Silence. You calculated this. I anticipated it. There's a difference. You could have warned her. She knew the numbers. He didn't argue, because deep down he knew something too. She had always believed risk would bend in her favor. It didn't. Moving day was quiet. No dramatic eviction officers. No furniture dragged to the curb. She negotiated a short sale before full foreclosure. It preserved some credit, minimized public damage smart. Even in collapse, she calculated. I drove past once. Not to witness. To understand. The house looked smaller without her staging. Bare windows, empty driveway. For sale sign planted firmly in the lawn. Liquidation made visible. She texted me that night, you've destroyed 30 years of work. I typed carefully. 30 years built on misrepresentation. She didn't respond. Dad moved into a modest condo near the lake. Smaller, simpler. Unstaged, he invited me over one Sunday. The place felt quiet, honest. No more secrets, he said while pouring coffee. Are you angry with me? I asked. He considered the question. I'm grieving, he admitted. For her. For the version of her I thought I married. That felt heavier than anger. I never wanted this, I said softly. I know, he replied. And I didn't want you carrying debt that wasn't yours. We sat in silence, not tense. Just real. 3 weeks after the house sold, I received official confirmation. Partial restitution approved. Tax corrections accepted. Credit restored. It wasn't triumph. It was closure. Eviction isn't just physical, it's structural. She lost the house. She lost the boutique lease shortly after. She lost narrative control. But what she truly lost was leverage. Trollboot on secrecy collapses when exposed. That's the part she never prepared for. She called once more. Voice calmer this time. You could have helped me, she said. I did, I replied. When? When I stopped pretending nothing was wrong, silence. Then she said quietly, "I don't recognize you." "I know." And that was the point. The daughter who absorbed guilt would have negotiated. Compromised. Covered. This version did not. Eviction isn't cruelty. It's removal of entitlement. She had believed she owned the story, owned the house, owned the financial narrative. Now she owned consequence. And for the first time in her life, there was no one left to absorb it for her. It wasn't my mother who broke next. It was my sister. Lena had stayed quiet through most of it. At the Mother's Day gathering, she stood near the edge of the yard, arms folded tightly across her chest, saying almost nothing. When the trust transfer surfaced, she looked shocked. When the tax filings came out, she looked pale. But when the credit cards were mentioned, that's when she went silent in a different way. Because one of those cards had been mailed to her address. And I knew it. I just hadn't said it publicly. Not yet. She showed up at my apartment on a Thursday night. No warning text, no call, just a knock sharp, fast, repeated. When I opened the door, she looked nothing like the composed corporate attorney everyone admired. Her hair was pulled back too tightly. Mascara smudged slightly beneath one eye. She looked cornered. "You didn't have to do that," she said immediately. "Do what?" "Blow everything up." I stepped aside and let her in. She didn't sit, she paced. "You filed claims, you froze accounts, you triggered audits. Do you understand what that does?" "Yes," I said calmly. "It initiates review." She stopped pacing and stared at me. "You're talking like this is a compliance case?" "It is." She let out a harsh laugh. "It's our mother." There it was, blood over law, emotion over evidence. I gave her chances. I said evenly, "For 3 years." Lena's jaw tightened. "You could have warned me." That made me look at her carefully. "Warned you about what?" Her silence answered. I held her gaze. "You knew." It wasn't a question. She looked away. "That's not fair," she muttered. "Then explain." She swallowed hard. "When the first card came to my apartment, I thought it was a mistake. And the second, she said you authorized it? And you believed that? She said you didn't want Dad knowing you needed help. The old narrative. Difficult daughter. Financial mess, needy. I felt something cold settle in my chest. "You're an attorney," I said quietly. "You know what unauthorized credit means." Her voice rose. "I didn't use them, but you signed for the deliveries." Silence. Heavy, she didn't deny it. "You didn't ask questions," I continued, "because it was easier not to." Her composure cracked slightly. "You think I don't feel sick about it," she snapped. "I think you feel exposed." That hit. She stepped back like I'd physically pushed her. "You're unbelievable," she whispered. "No," I said. "I'm done pretending." For years, Lena had been the golden one. Organized, polished. Achieving, Mom's reflection, I was the one who asked uncomfortable questions, the one who didn't fit neatly. Now the structure was shifting, and Lena didn't know where she stood. "She's losing the house," Lena said quietly. "I know, she's alone. She built that." Lena stared at me, eyes bright with frustration. "You're so cold." "No," I said softly. "I'm clear. That difference mattered." She walked toward the window, staring out at the city lights. "You think I didn't see it," she said suddenly. "See what?" "The favoritism, the way she talked to you, the way she'd compare us." I stayed quiet. "She told me you were unstable," Lena continued. "That you exaggerated things, that you were dramatic, and you believed her. First. That admission was small, but real. She said you were bad with money." Lena added quietly that she had to intervene. I almost smiled. Intervene. That was one word for it. "I wasn't bad with money," I said calmly. "I was missing money." Lena closed her eyes briefly. "She always said you'd never check." There it was. The sentence that snapped something in her. "She said you were too emotional to audit her." The irony sat thick between us. I let that hang, because sometimes silence forces truth to echo louder. Lena turned back toward me slowly. "She used me," she said, not accusing. Realizing. "Yes," I said gently. Her breathing grew uneven. "For years I thought I was protecting her," she whispered. "I thought I was being loyal." "You were being compliant." The word landed differently for her than it did for me. Compliance isn't evil, but it enables. "I could lose my license," she said suddenly. Now we were at the core, not family, not guilt, reputation, career. "That depends," I said calmly, "on whether you were complicit or negligent." She stared at me. "You're dissecting me?" "I'm clarifying." She let out a shaky breath. "She called me yesterday," Lena admitted. "She told me to stand by her, to tell everyone the trust was moved with Dad's knowledge. And she said, if I don't, I'm choosing you." There it was, the line drawn. Lena sank onto my couch like her legs couldn't hold her anymore. "I don't want to choose," she whispered. "You already did," I said softly. Her eyes filled. For years. The breaking point isn't loud. It's quiet realization. She had built her identity around being the responsible one, the loyal one, the safe one. Now that safety was compromised, not because of me, because of truth. "I don't know who she is anymore," Lena said. "You do?" I replied. "You just can't reconcile it." She covered her face with her hands. "I feel like I've been standing on a floor that isn't solid." "You have." We sat in silence, not hostile, not warm, just real. Finally, she looked up. "If I tell the truth," she said slowly, "it ends everything." "It already ended," I answered. She searched my face for something: anger, superiority, victory. She didn't find any, because this wasn't about winning. It was about stopping the cycle. Lena stood slowly. I can't defend her anymore, she said. That sentence was the fracture. Not dramatic, but permanent. She'll say you turned me against her. I didn't, I said quietly. She did? Lena nodded once, not fully steady, but resolved. And for the first time since this began, she wasn't standing behind our mother. She was standing alone, choosing, breaking away. The golden child had finally stepped out of the spotlight and into the light. Grandma Evelyn did not attend the Mother's Day gathering. That wasn't unusual. At 79, she avoided loud family events. She preferred quiet dinners, controlled conversations, rooms where people listened before they spoke. But she watched. Grandma always watched. She called me 3 days after the foreclosure notice became public record. Her voice was calm. Come see me, she said. Lone. There was no drama in her tone, which meant something had already been decided. Her house was smaller than my parents' had been. Brick, 1 story. No manicured performance. When I stepped inside, the air smelled like tea and old books. She didn't hug me. She studied my face first. You're steady, she observed. Wes, good. She gestured toward the dining table. Not a banquet table. Not rented chairs, just 4 seats. Realistic. Grounded. On the table sat a leather folder. Thick, closed. You've handled this carefully, she said. I tried to. You didn't shout? No. You didn't insult? No. You documented? Yes. She nodded once. Approval. Not emotional. Measured. I suspected something was wrong years ago, she said quietly. With the trust? With Diane folded her hands neatly. The way she controlled narrative. The way she separated you and Lena. The way she framed you as unstable whenever you disagreed. That word again, unstable? She intercepted a check once? Grandma continued. I blinked. What check? Graduation gift. 15,000. I mailed it to you. My stomached. She told me you returned it. Said you didn't want charity? Of course she had. Control required isolation. I didn't speak. Grandma slid the leather folder toward me. Inside were documents. Copies of the original trust agreement. Amendments, correspondence, and something Will revised 2 days ago. You changed it, I said quietly. Yes. Her voice was steel. Your mother's inheritance has been restructured. I didn't immediately respond, because inheritance wasn't what mattered. Why? I asked softly. Because accountability must extend structurally, she said. Structural. Not emotional. Structural. She leveraged that trust to build an illusion of stability. Grandma continued. She used your father's silence and your sister's compliance as reinforcement. I nodded slowly. She cannot benefit from manipulation again. The finality in her voice was unmistakable. What does that mean? I asked. It means assets move where integrity exists. She opened the will fully. My name appeared beside a larger percentage than before. So did Lena's. My mother's share had been reduced to a minimal amount protected from challenge, but symbolic. Blood is not immunity. Grandma said firmly. The sentence landed deep. For years, she continued, I watched your mother avoid consequence. Your father avoided confrontation. Lena avoided discomfort. She met my eyes directly. You did not. The approval wasn't warm. It was earned. This is not revenge, she added. I know. This is containment. Yes, that word fit perfectly. Containment prevents recurrence. My phone buzzed on the table. A text from Lena. She's furious. She found out about the will update. Grandma didn't look surprised. She called me, she said calmly. Threatened to contest. And I reminded her that misappropriation weakens moral standing. A small, almost invisible smile crossed her lips. She asked if you manipulated me. And you said. I told her I'm too old to be manipulated. Silence settled comfortably between us. Not tense, not heavy, just clear. Grandma poured tea. I am not punishing her, she said quietly. I am preventing further damage. That distinction mattered. Punishment is reactive. Prevention is strategic. She will tell people you turn me against her. She continued. She already has. Grandma nodded. Let her? She leaned back slightly. Control collapses when exposure meets structure. I absorbed that slowly. Exposure had begun at Mother's Day. Structure was now reinforcing it. Legal filings. Asset redistribution, family realignment. My mother was losing not just reputation, but leverage. She believes this is temporary, Grandma said. It's not. No, she agreed. Permanent. There was no satisfaction in her voice, just acceptance. I loved her, Grandma added quietly. I still do. I looked at her carefully. Love without boundaries becomes enabling, she said before I could speak. That sentence felt like closure in itself. For decades, my mother had operated in emotional gray areas. Now the lines were sharp, clear, drawn. Grandma closed the folder. The narrative has shifted, she said. Yes, but understand this, she added. Accountability is isolating. I nodded. I'm prepared. She studied me one last time. You are no longer the family scapegoat, she said calmly. You are the audit? That wasn't praise, it was recognition. And in that quiet brick house, at a fork-seat table without spectacle, the final structural move had been made. My mother had tried to humiliate me publicly. Now the system itself was adjusting around her, not loudly, not violently, but permanently. Grandma sipped her tea. And just like that, the board was no longer hers. Desperation doesn't look dramatic at first, it looks polite, measured, controlled. My mother didn't scream after Grandma changed the will. She didn't show up in my apartment. She didn't threaten lawsuits publicly. Instead, she invited the entire family to dinner. Again, subject line, clearing misunderstandings, family only. No invoices this time. No attachments, just 3 sentences about healing and moving forward. I stared at the email for a long time. This wasn't reconciliation. This was positioning. When someone loses financial leverage, they pivot to emotional leverage. And my mother was very good at emotional leverage. The dinner was held at a small private room in a local restaurant. Neutral territory, controlled environment. She chose it carefully. When I walked in, she was already seated, calm, composed, wearing the same pearl earrings she used during important negotiations. Grant was there. Lena was there. Dad sat quietly at the end of the table. Grandma did not attend. That told me everything. My mother stood when I entered. "Thank you for coming," she said softly. Her voice wasn't sharp anymore. It was fragile, manufactured fragility. We sat. Water glasses clinked. Silverware adjusted. She folded her hands on the table. "I made mistakes," she began. Grant looked hopeful immediately. Dad looked cautious. Lena remained still. "I moved money when I shouldn't have," my mother continued. "I filed incorrectly." She didn't say fraud. She didn't say theft. Language matters. "But I was under pressure," she added quickly. There it was. Context framing. I was protecting our stability. Protecting this family. I didn't interrupt. Let her build it. Let her construct the narrative. "I was afraid," she said, looking directly at me now. "Afraid of losing everything. Afraid of failing." Her voice trembled slightly, a controlled tremble. "I never meant to hurt you." The room was silent. Grant swallowed hard. Lena didn't move. Dad's fingers tightened around his glass. This was the play. Not denial. Not attack. Confession, strategically diluted. Because partial admission earns sympathy. Full admission earns consequence. "You could withdraw the filings," she said gently, almost as an afterthought. There it was. The actual objective. Not forgiveness. Reversal. "If the restitution claim is removed," she continued carefully, "I can negotiate with the bank. We can rebuild." That word again. "Rewriting liability as shared burden." I met her gaze steadily. "You're asking me to absorb the loss," I said calmly. "I'm asking you to save your mother." The sentence hung in the air. Grant shifted. "Ava," he began quietly. Lena cut in. "Mom, stop." It was the first time she had interrupted her. My mother blinked. "Stop what?" she asked softly, framing this like she caused it. Lena replied. The temperature in the room shifted. My mother turned toward her. "I'm not blaming her." "You just did." Silence. Grant looked between us, unsettled. "This doesn't have to destroy everything," he said. "It already did," I answered. My mother leaned forward slightly. "I am still your mother, and you're still responsible," I replied. Her composure flickered. I apologized. "You adjusted wording." Her eyes flashed. I admitted fault. "You minimized it." The room tightened. Dad finally spoke. "Deanne, what exactly you're asking?" She exhaled sharply. "I'm asking her to drop the civil claim." There it was. Clear, direct. "Without restitution?" Lena said slowly. "Yes," my mother answered. "Without repayment?" I added. "Yes." She snapped, patience cracking. "Because if she doesn't," she continued, voice rising, "this family will never recover." That was the final card. Fear of fragmentation, guilt of destruction, family collapse pinned to my decision, the desperate play acri war. I folded my hands calmly on the table. "You sent an invoice for my existence," I said evenly. Her jaw tightened. "You made my humiliation public." She looked away. "You misused my trust, my credit, my identity." Her breathing grew shallow. "And now," I continued softly, "you want me to erase consequence so the image can survive." Silence. No one interrupted, because no one could. "You're choosing paperwork over blood," she whispered. "No," I said. "I'm choosing integrity over illusion." That sentence ended it. Not loudly, not explosively. Just finally. Grant looked down. Lena exhaled slowly. Dad closed his eyes briefly. My mother leaned back in her chair. Something in her posture shifted. Not defeat, but realization. The play had failed. Emotion didn't override documentation. Guilt didn't override structure. For the first time in her life, control didn't return when she softened her voice. She looked at me differently now. Not angry, not superior, just uncertain. "You won't change your mind?" she asked quietly. No. The word was calm, unmovable. The desperate play had been made, and it had landed nowhere. No applause, no rescue, just reality. The dinner ended shortly after. No one lingered. No one embraced dramatically. As we stood to leave, my mother didn't reach for me. She didn't threaten. She didn't plead again. She simply sat there, still, and for the first time, she had no move left. My mother didn't fall apart in one dramatic moment. There was no screaming breakdown in a parking lot, no viral video, no scene with police lights. Her collapse was quieter than that. It was administrative. It was social. It was the kind of shame that arrives in small, undeniable pieces, until you realize there's nowhere left to stand. The foreclosure notice wasn't gossip at first. It was a link. A public record page someone could access in 10 seconds. A cousin forwarded it to a group chat with no commentary, just the URL and a single line. "Is this real?" No one replied for a long time. Then the replies started, careful and awkward. "Maybe it's a mistake. Could be a similar name." That's her address, though. That last message was the one that changed everything, because it wasn't opinion, it was confirmation. The boutique closed the following week. Not loudly, no going out of business banners, just a handwritten sign taped inside the glass door. "Silo CDUNTL FARTR Noche." That sentence sounded temporary, but everyone knew what it meant. The boutique had been my mother's pride, her proof, her identity. It was where she dressed up to greet customers like a local celebrity, where she told people stories about sacrifice and hard work, where she controlled the narrative her life. And now the door was locked, lights off. Empty shelves visible from the sidewalk. A place that once felt like her stage looked like a hollow set after the actors left. My mother tried to control the story at first. She called relatives one by one, using that gentle voice she reserved for persuasion. "It's a misunderstanding," she'd say. "It's being handled. Ava is overreacting. She's always been intense." That word again. Intense. A softer replacement for unstable. But something had changed. People weren't asking me to be quiet anymore. They weren't automatically translating her words into excuses, because it wasn't just my word against hers now. It was evident: filings, bank statements, IRS correspondence. "You can't charm a document," she called Aunt Marlene. Marlene later told Grant she didn't even pick up, not out of cruelty. Out of exhaustion, she called Uncle Victor. He answered, listened in silence, then said only one sentence: "I can't fix this for you," and hung up. That was the pattern. Not yelling, not accusations, just distance. A cold withdrawal of emotional support. My mother had depended on the family's habit of smoothing things over. But habits break when they become embarrassing. And now the embarrassment had a paper trail. The house sale happened quickly, too quickly to be graceful. The "for sale" sign appeared on a Monday. By Friday, there were showings. Strangers walking through rooms my mother had curated for decades, assessing value with impersonal eyes. Neighbors noticed. Neighbors always notice. The neighborhood chat board started whispering without using her name. "Anyone know why that house on Cedar Ridge is selling so fast? I heard it's foreclosure related. Didn't she own that boutique on Main?" A small town doesn't need proof to talk, but proof makes the talking louder. My mother's social circle shifted next. It wasn't just family. It was her friends, the women she had brunch with, the ones who praised her strength, the ones who liked her carefully posted photos of dinner parties and holidays. They didn't confront her. They didn't comment. They simply stopped interacting. A quiet unfollow, a gradual disappearance, the kind of silence that stings because it offers no argument to fight. My mother sent out texts. "Miss you. Let's catch up. Are you free this weekend? I could use a friend." No reply. And when people wait long enough, you stop being a person to them and become a risk. A social liability. Grant told me later that she tried to hold another dinner. Not a family dinner. A friend's dinner? She cooked. She set the table. She posted a photo of a candlelit spread to Instagram. Careful framing, no faces. A performance of normal life. Only one person came. A woman she'd known since high school. She stayed 30 minutes, made an excuse, and left early. My mother sat at the table after alone, staring at plates she couldn't force anyone to admire. That image followed me for a moment, not because I felt guilty, because it was the first time I realized what she valued most. Not love, not family, witnesses. And now she had none. She turned to Lena. That was inevitable. My mother always returned to the child she thought she could still influence. But Lena had changed after the confrontation at my apartment. Lena didn't yell at her. She just said, calmly, "I can't lie for you anymore." My mother cried on the phone. Real tears this time. Not performed. It didn't matter. Because the truth doesn't soften because someone cries. Lena offered her one thing. "I'll help you find a short-term rental. Not money, not defense. Not a narrative. Just logistics." Even that felt like mercy. And my mother hated mercy when it came without control. My father didn't speak to her much during that period. Not out of revenge, out of grief. He moved into the condo by the lake and stopped answering her calls. When she emailed, he replied with 2 words. "Please stop." Those words were quieter than anger, but they were final. My mother tried to reframe it as temporary conflict. "She'll calm down? Come back." They always do. But this time, nobody came back. Because this time, the family had seen the receipts. And once people see receipts, they can't unsee them. One evening, my phone buzzed with a message from a cousin I barely knew. "Your mom came by Aunt Patricia's house today. She waited in the driveway for an hour. Patricia didn't go outside." I stared at that text for a long time. Not with satisfaction, with clarity. That was my mother's new reality. Waiting for doors that no longer opened. The public collapse wasn't loud. It wasn't cinematic fireworks. It was something colder, a slow social eviction. One ignored call after another, one unanswered message, one polite refusal. People didn't need to hate her to abandon her. They just needed to stop protecting her. That was the real punishment. Not jail, not screaming, just the loss of audience, the loss of believers, the loss of the story she had been selling for decades. And in that quiet isolation, my mother finally faced the one thing she couldn't manipulate. What remained when nobody was watching: the settlement was signed on a Tuesday morning. No courtroom drama, no raised voices, no cinematic confrontation. Just a long conference table, neutral walls, and a stack of documents that smelled faintly of fresh toner. I sat beside my attorney. My father sat across from me, not as opposition, not as mediator, but as witness. My mother arrived 10 minutes late. She looked thinner, not fragile, just smaller. Control takes energy, and she had spent years holding everything together with force. When that force disappeared, so did the illusion of size. She didn't look at me. When she sat down, her lawyer spoke first, language like mutual resolution, structured restitution, agreement without admission of further liability. Careful words, sanitized. I signed where I needed to sign. Not angrily, not triumphantly, just precisely. The agreement required partial repayment from the sale of the house, the remaining amount structured over time, tax corrections finalized, credit fully restored, no further financial entanglement, no jail, no destruction, just accountability. When the final page slid across the table toward her, my mother hesitated. For a second, just one, her hand hovered over the signature line. This wasn't about money anymore. This was about control being surrendered in ink. She signed, the pen scratched softly against paper. That sound felt louder than anything she had said over the past months. It was the sound of something ending. Outside the office building, my father and I stood quietly on the sidewalk. The air was cool, early autumn, leaves just beginning to change. It's done, he said. Yes. He didn't look relieved exactly. He looked lighter, like someone who had been holding his breath for years and didn't realize it until he exhaled. I should have seen it sooner, he said quietly. Maybe. I answered. He looked at me carefully. You're not angry with me. I considered that honestly. I admitted, but anger is heavy. He nodded slowly. I confused peace with silence, he said. That sentence mattered, because silence had protected her for years. But it had cost him something too. You're not silent anymore, I said. He smiled slightly. No. We walked to his car without saying much else. Not because there was tension. Because there was nothing left to argue. Sunday dinners became routine, not elaborate, not performative, just simple. Pasta, coffee, open windows, no narrative management, no comparisons, no invisible scoring system, just conversation. We talked about books, work, lake views from his condo balcony, normal things, healthy things. One evening, as we washed dishes side by side, he said, You don't flinch anymore. I paused. What do you mean? When your phone buzzes, he said. You used to tense up. I hadn't noticed. But he was right. For years, every notification from her carried tension, expectation, demand. Now, my phone buzzed, and I simply looked at it. Or didn't. She tried again. Of course, not with anger, not with threats, with guilt. Her first message came 3 days after the settlement. I hope you're happy. I didn't reply. The second. I lost everything. I read it twice. Then closed the screen. The third is longer. I never meant for things to go this far. Families forgive. That's what makes them families. There it was, reframing accountability as cruelty, rebranding consequence as betrayal. I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I opened my settings. Blocked contact. The screen asked, Are you sure? Yes. I pressed confirm. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like removing a splinter that had been embedded for years. Not anger. Relief. Freedom isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It arrives quietly in moments you almost miss. Like walking into work and realizing you're focused on strategy instead of stress. Like reviewing financial reports without your chest tightening. Like laughing at something small without guilt attached. One Friday afternoon, my manager called me into his office. We're expanding the compliance division, he said. I want you leading the new audit team. 3 months ago, I would have hesitated, would have wondered if I was capable, would have questioned whether I was too intense. Now, I am that, I said calmly. He smiled. You're thorough, he said. I almost laughed. No, I don't. A week later, I walked along the lake alone, wind pushing gently against the water, city skyline steady behind me. For years, I had been defined in contrast to her. The difficult daughter, the intense one, the financial burden. Now there was no contrast, just me. No invoice, no defense, no narrative correction, just quiet. I thought about the house, the boutique, the public shame, and I realized something surprising. I didn't feel victorious. I felt balanced. The ledger had closed. Not because she suffered, but because I stopped absorbing what wasn't mine. My phone buzzed once more. Unknown number. I stared at it, let it ring, let it stop. Then I slipped the phone back into my pocket and kept walking. The wind moved around me, clean and cool. For the first time in my life, I wasn't reacting, I wasn't defending, I wasn't bracing, I was simply moving forward. Professional life steady, credit restored, father beside me, sister rebuilding honestly, and my mother. No longer the axis of my identity. The story didn't end in destruction. It ended in structure, in boundaries, in quiet strength. I wasn't the daughter on a balance sheet. I wasn't the liability she tried to calculate. I was the audit. And once the books were balanced, I closed them. For good.